These were the wonky teeth that ultimately got Ted Bundy convicted. Before that moment, Bundy had already escaped custody twice in 1977 while awaiting trial in Colorado. During his first escape, he was allowed to act as his own attorney and therefore wasn't put in handcuffs, which gave him enough freedom to slip away from guards and jump from a courthouse window. After being recaptured, he engineered a second escape by deliberately starving himself, losing enough weight to squeeze through a small opening in the ceiling of his jail cell. That second escape took him all the way to Florida, where he apparently still couldn't resist his murderous urges. While hiding out in Tallahassee, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house and carried out a brutal attack on 4 young women, leaving 2 of them dead. One of the victims, 20-year-old Lisa Levy, was bitten deeply on the left butt cheek during the assault, leaving behind a clear dental impression. Unlike Bundy's earlier crimes, which were built largely on circumstantial evidence, the bite mark was matched to his unusually crooked teeth and served as the key piece of evidence that finally sealed his conviction as a serial killer. October of 2024, Micah Smith took his 3 young children, ages 2, 4, and 8, on a 9-mile hike in Utah that authorities described as extremely difficult and dangerous, especially as a major storm was rolling in. Court records say Smith failed to check the weather and continued climbing, even after sending photos of the incoming storm to his wife, who urged him to turn back. Investigators say he refused, later telling police he was comfortable hiking in the dark without lights. By the time they reached the summit around 6 p.m., hail and snow had started falling. The family began descending, but only made it about 600 feet before one child fell and struck their head. At that point, Smith decided to shelter in place overnight with the children, despite worsening weather and inadequate clothing. During the night, prosecutors say the children repeatedly said they were cold, exhausted, and wanted to go home. One child allegedly begged Smith to turn back earlier, saying she was afraid she might not survive, but he refused, calling the hike a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Court documents state Smith later claimed he performed CPR on his son overnight and instructed his daughter to continue the CPR before leaving his children behind. When search and rescue teams located Smith the next day, he was all alone and appeared completely unconcerned about his kids, telling responders he believed one of his children was already dead. A helicopter crew later found the 3 children together, severely hypothermic and inadequately clothed. All 3 children ultimately survived, though 2 were in critical condition, and one had a core body temperature of 63 degrees Fahrenheit that led to a stroke and emergency brain surgery. Smith was later charged with aggravated child abuse and child torture, with prosecutors requesting no bail, arguing he repeatedly chose to continue, despite warnings from the children, their mother, and the worsening weather. On December 11, 2002, 22-year-old Alan Menzies murdered his best friend, 21-year-old Thomas McKendrick, inside his home in West Lothian, Scotland. Menzies had become obsessed with the film Queen of the Damned, watching it more than 100 times, and later told police he believed the character Queen Akasha was visiting him and instructing him to kill for immortality. When McKendrick came over that morning, Menzies attacked him with knives and a hammer, claiming the violence was triggered after McKendrick insulted Akasha. After killing him, Menzies drank McKendrick's blood and ate part of his head, stating this was the necessary process to become a vampire. He then placed the body of his best friend in a wheelbarrow and buried it in a shallow grave, where it remained undiscovered for the next 6 weeks. In court, prosecutors revealed Menzies had a long history of serious violence starting at age 14, including multiple stabbings. He literally told the court, "If you don't murder somebody, you can't become a vampire." Menzies received a life sentence with at least 18 years before parole eligibility, but in 2004, less than 2 years after the murder, he was found dead in his prison cell. This was the moment when an off-duty police officer in Barcelona realized something was seriously wrong at a subway station. A young man on the platform appeared disoriented and unsteady, drifting dangerously close to the edge in a station where trains arrive every few minutes. The officer, later identified as Felisa Pozas, was off-duty but immediately recognized the risk. She walked to an emergency SOS intercom and pressed the button to alert Metro Control that someone needed help. But seconds later, the situation escalated as the man suddenly lost his balance and fell onto the tracks below. Without hesitating, Pozas ran toward him as several nearby commuters rushed in to help. Working against the clock, they grabbed him and hoisted him back onto the platform, knowing a train could enter the station at any moment. No one was seriously injured, and authorities later confirmed the man was not intoxicated. No further details about his condition have been released, but officials say the outcome could have easily been fatal if not for Pozas' awareness, her decision to act immediately, and the fact that she didn't wait for someone else to step in. DJ Carey, a former Irish hurling legend, was jailed after admitting he spent years faking a cancer diagnosis to scam friends and contacts out of nearly £350,000. Prosecutors revealed he sent staged photos showing what appeared to be medical tubing in his nose, later exposed as an iPhone charging cable taped to his face. He claimed the money was urgently needed for treatment, exploiting sympathy and trust while continuing the deception. The scheme collapsed when victims grew suspicious, and authorities confirmed he never even had cancer at all. Carey pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges and was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. A man once spent nearly 5 months locked inside Rikers Island without realizing he could have walked free at any point for just $2. Court records later showed a judge had ordered his release only a week after he was arrested for a nonviolent offense, setting an absurdly low bail, but his lawyer never told him. With no one informing him of his status, he remained trapped inside one of the most notoriously violent jail complexes in the United States, a place long plagued by assaults, gang activity, neglect, and inmate murders. By the time the mistake had been discovered, months of his life had already been lost to one of the most dangerous detention systems in the country. This was the moment a routine shoplifting stop inside a Walmart in Canton, Ohio nearly turned deadly. In December of 2025, body cam footage shows 2 suspects, Shane Newman and Katarina Jeffrey, being held in a small back office for questioning when the situation abruptly escalated. As Canton police officers apparently let their guard down, Newman reached into his clothing, pulled out a handgun, and attempted to fire it at an officer from close range. Luckily, the weapon malfunctioned and failed to discharge, a failure investigators say likely prevented a fatal shooting inside the store. The officer immediately moved to restrain Newman as additional officers rushed in to secure the room. Both suspects were taken into custody without anyone being physically injured. Police later confirmed Newman was legally prohibited from possessing a firearm and was also found to be in possession of hard drugs at the time of the arrest. He was charged with attempted murder, felonious assault on a police officer, robbery, drug possession, and having a weapon while under disability. His girlfriend was simply charged with complicity to commit robbery. This was the moment the gaming world lost an all-time legend. On December 21st, 2025, Vince Zampella, the 55-year-old co-founder of Respawn Entertainment and Infinity Ward, and one of the most influential figures in modern video games, died in a violent single-car accident on Angeles Crest Highway, a notoriously windy mountain road north of Los Angeles. Driving a 2026 Ferrari 296 GTS, the car veered off the scenic roadway just after exiting a tunnel, slammed into a concrete barrier, and erupted into flames, trapping Zampella in the burning wreckage as he was pronounced dead at the scene. A passenger was also ejected from the vehicle and later died at the hospital, their identity not yet released. The California Highway Patrol said the vehicle left the roadway for unknown reasons, and authorities have not yet disclosed whether speed, mechanical failure, or other factors played a role. Zampella's death comes just days before Christmas, shocking the gaming world and leaving his 3 children and ex-wife grieving, while studios across the industry are mourning the loss of a creative force whose work shaped franchises like Call of Duty, Titanfall, Apex Legends, and Battlefield. This was the moment an American tourist realized she was in serious danger. While riding the Rail Runner mountain coaster in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, 2 adult black bears stepped almost directly onto the track in front of her. The coaster cannot be steered, stopped, or exited, leaving her a sitting duck as the bears stared her down from just a few feet away. But she was extremely lucky the bear showed curiosity rather than aggression, a common response when black bears don't feel threatened or have become accustomed to human activity. Wildlife officials later warned the situation could have turned fatal in seconds if the bears had reacted differently. Here's a video of a man playing with a blue-ringed octopus, completely oblivious that he's handling one of the most lethal animals on the planet. The tiny octopus contains tetrodotoxin, a venom powerful enough to kill an adult human within minutes, causing total paralysis while leaving the victim fully conscious and aware of what's happening. A single bite can shut down the lungs, stopping breathing as the body becomes unable to move or cry for help. There's no antidote, and survival depends entirely on immediate artificial ventilation until the toxin wears off. Even worse, blue-ringed octopuses often bite painlessly, meaning the man wouldn't even realize he's been bitten until his muscles begin to fail. Here's some insane footage of a domestic cat that's reached an astounding age of 29 years, the rough human equivalent of someone in their late 130s. Most house cats live 12 to 15 years, and even reaching 20 is rare. Cats that make it this far are often born with unusually resistant genetics that slow age-related organ failure, especially in the kidneys and heart, and that advantage is typically reinforced by consistent care in a low-stress environment. A doorbell cam caught this bird appearing to float in midair because the camera's frame rate synced perfectly with its wings. Each time the camera captured a frame, the bird's wings were in the exact same position, creating the illusion that it was suspended motionless above the driveway. In January of 2020, Storm Gloria completely battered the coast of Spain, whipping seawater rich in organic material into massive clouds of sea foam. Powerful winds blew the foam inland, piling it waist-high through the streets and swallowing storefronts, cars, and people. The surreal scenes were a side effect of a storm that also caused deadly flooding, widespread destruction, and multiple fatalities across the country. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11. Since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Lowenstein, the third richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. The New Mexico Penitentiary Riot of 1980 was by far the most violent prison riot in U.S. history. It started because of prolonged issues like overcrowding, poor conditions, and mistreatment of inmates. But it quickly turned horrific as inmates took total control of the prison and held 12 officers hostage. Several inmates were killed by other prisoners, with some being tortured and mutilated because they were labeled as snitches. The carnage that took place in Cell Block 4 was particularly atrocious. One inmate was blowtorched in the face and eyes until his head literally exploded. Police finally regained control of the prison 36 hours after the riots had begun. By then, 33 inmates were killed and more than 200 were treated for injuries. In 2008, Canadian woman Marilyn Bergeron told her family that something terrible had happened but wouldn't elaborate, calling it worse than assault or witnessing a crime, and that she no longer felt safe living alone. Soon afterwards, she left her Quebec City home and completely disappeared. This last photo shows her withdrawing $60 from an ATM on the day she vanished, and she was never seen again. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. Best known for playing Robbie Rotten in Lazytown, Icelandic actor Stefán Karl Stefánsson was told his pancreatic cancer was inoperable at the young age of 43. He died a few months later and wanted no funeral, instead requesting to have his ashes scattered in secrecy in a distant ocean. He will always be number one. Throughout South London, you can find large sections of fence made out of stretchers from World War II. They were used by civil authorities to transport the wounded when England was bombed by the Nazis. Just 2 months after 9/11, another commercial airliner, American Airlines Flight 587, crashed into a Queens, New York neighborhood just after takeoff. 265 people were killed and several homes were completely destroyed. One of the victims had previously survived the 9/11 attacks, only to end up dying in another tragedy. In 2017, 16-year-old cross-country runner Patrick Cooper was participating in a mountain race in Alaska when he suddenly took a wrong turn and became lost. At some point, Patrick called his family members and informed them that he was being chased by an aggressive black bear. His mangled corpse was eventually found by another runner who went searching for Patrick after finishing the race. In the year 2000, Pakistani archaeologists announced the incredible discovery of an ancient mummy, believed to be the daughter of Persian King Xerxes the Great. This sparked a heated diplomatic dispute, with both Iran and Pakistan fighting over ownership of the amazing find. However, after closer examination, museum curators discovered that the mummy was actually a woman who died from blunt force trauma in 1996. It may have even been the victim of a violent murder. Several people were arrested for the massive hoax, but the woman's identity and the details surrounding her death remain unclear to this day. Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. From the 70s to the 90s, more than 20 people were killed by postal workers in at least 40 separate incidents. It happened so frequently that going postal became a slang term for becoming exceptionally angry. This was referenced in the 1996 Jumanji movie when the hunter goes to a sporting goods store to replace his gun, and the salesman asks him, "You don't work for the post office, do you?" While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. This is the face of a mass shooter, David Katz, showing no emotion as he plays in a Madden tournament against other pro gamers. Katz was an elite player known as Bread, who always had the same lifeless expression on his face whether he won or lost a game. During a professional Madden 19 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, Katz refused to shake the hand of his opponent after losing to him and stormed out of the tournament. Shortly afterwards, he returned with 2 handguns and fired 12 rounds into the players and crowd. 2 people were killed and 10 others were wounded before Katz turned the gun on himself. This eerie photo shows the red dot from David's sight on the chest of 22-year-old victim Elijah Clayton, who made a last-minute decision to enter the tournament. It was later revealed that Katz had suffered from numerous mental illnesses and had been institutionalized several times throughout his life. EA Sports offered its most heartfelt sympathies and donated $1 million to the victims' families in lieu of the senseless tragedy. This surveillance image shows 14-year-old Noah Donohoe riding his bike fully unclothed on the day he went missing while apparently heading to meet some friends in Belfast. 6 days later, his body was discovered in a storm drain with an autopsy confirming drowning as the cause of death, but his family is convinced he was murdered. Earlier this year, 41-year-old Ohio mother Tamara Banks was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the death of her daughter. Banks and her husband fed the girl almost nothing but Mountain Dew through a baby bottle, causing her teeth to rot and a severe case of diabetes, which eventually killed her. During a Taiwanese concert in 2015, a large amount of colored cornstarch powder was sprayed into a crowd of 1,000 people, creating a dense dust cloud of flammable powder in the air. The powder suddenly ignited near the stage, causing a massive fireball that quickly spread throughout the crowd. Despite the fire only lasting about 40 seconds, over 500 people were injured while 17 were killed. In 1981, 3 young men found the murdered body of a woman laying in a roadside ditch in Ohio. She was known as the Buckskin Girl because of the poncho she'd been wearing, but police struggled to identify her for decades. That was until 37 years later in 2018 when DNA analysis identified her as hitchhiker Marcia King. Her mother had still been living in the same house with the same phone number, never giving up hope that her daughter may return home one day. Marcia's murder remains unsolved, but the case is still open. In a form of doping known as boosting, wheelchair athletes with spinal injuries will sometimes intentionally injure themselves below the waist to cause their bodies to respond by raising blood pressure, thus enhancing their performance. Techniques include clamping down on a catheter to overfill the bladder, breaking toe bones, and administering electric shocks to the legs, feet, and testicles. Boosting has been completely banned by the International Paralympic Committee since 1994. In March of 1998, 23-year-old Virginia woman Amy Lynn Bradley was on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship to Curacao when she suddenly vanished from the balcony of her cabin around 6 a.m. The Coast Guard conducted a 4-day search in surrounding waters but found no trace of her, so authorities concluded that she simply fell overboard and drowned. But in the years since, there have been several reported sightings of Amy that suggest she may have been kidnapped and forced into human trafficking. 1 year after she went missing, a U.S. Navy sailor claimed he met a woman named Amy in a Barbados brothel who matched her description and begged him for help, but he didn't report it at the time. In 2005, an anonymous email was sent to Amy's family containing 2 photographs of a sex worker who closely resembled Amy, but nothing ever came of it. Despite various other sightings of the woman with men holding on to her, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead in March of 2010, 12 years after her disappearance. This is the harrowing skull of a man with Proteus syndrome, a rare and awful condition characterized by the overgrowth of skin, organs, tissues, and bones. Nikola Tesla originally expected to live to the age of 150, but later lowered this estimate to 135 years when he was forced to give up alcohol due to prohibition. He thought that consuming alcohol was good for the body and was a heavy drinker as a result. Tesla ended up dying at the age of 86. When Revolutionary hero Guy Fawkes was convicted of high treason in 1605, his punishment was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, meaning he would be hanged almost to the point of death, have his intestines and sex organs removed while still alive, decapitated, and have his limbs torn off. JFK's older brother Joseph most likely would have been the presidential candidate instead, but was killed in a top-secret flying mission during World War II. John once said that he never would have gotten into politics if his brother Joe had survived. In 2014, a Jamaican phone scammer threatened to kill a retired American man named William Webster when he wouldn't fall for his scam. But the scammer didn't know that Webster was the former director of both the FBI and the CIA. When he flew to New York City in 2017, he was immediately arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. In In 1740, Ivan VI became Emperor of Russia when he was only 2 months old following the death of his Empress mother. Just 1 year into his reign, the baby was overthrown by his cousin and sent to prison. He spent the next 20 years of his life in solitary confinement without any of the guards knowing his true identity, before eventually being killed in a failed rescue attempt, as was the plan if he ever tried to escape. Earlier this week, New York State officials raided the home of social media star Peanut the Squirrel and seized him from their owners before tragically euthanizing their beloved pet. Peanut was a rescue squirrel who was taken in more than 7 years ago by animal refuge owner Mark Longo. Having lost half its tail in a severe attack, Peanut wasn't adept enough to survive in the wild, so Longo decided to care for the squirrel in his home, eventually turning him into an adorable online sensation. According to reports, the state's DEC received multiple anonymous complaints about Peanut before showing up to Longo's home with at least 6 officers to confiscate the pet along with their rescue raccoon named Fred. The scumbag DEC claimed that it's illegal to keep young wildlife as pets since they're not well suited for life in captivity and may carry viruses. Upon hearing about Peanut and Fred's deaths, Longo tearfully posted that he was in deep shock and grief since Peanut was the best thing that ever happened to us. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. The father of physics, Max Planck, lived a life that was filled with tragedy. His wife died young, his oldest son died in World War I, his 2 twin daughters both died while giving birth, and his second son was executed by Nazi Germany because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. The Vietnamese version of Cinderella is much darker than the family-friendly version we know and love. In the end, Cinderella boils her stepsister to death, turns what remains of her into a sauce, and sends it to her stepmother to eat. She enjoys the sauce so much that she eats it all until she finds the skull of her dead daughter and dies from shock. In 2015, a 46-year-old woman accidentally took 55 milligrams of pure LSD, equal to a staggering 550 times the typical dosage. She apparently blacked out for the first 12 hours and felt pleasantly high for the second 12. The next day, her lifelong foot pain had ceased, which helped her kick her morphine addiction.